Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back for our last session of the day. Hope you're all enjoying this 21st LibTech Symposium. My name is Broderick, and like our earlier speaker, Roxanne, I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country in Canberra. Before I introduce our next speakers, I'd just like to remind you that you can ask questions of our speakers by using the Ask a Question button. Now, on my laptop, I need to scroll down the screen a little bit to see the button, so if you can't see it, you may need to do that too. So now I'd like to introduce the next presentation from Helen Balfour and Sharon Beccaria. Helen has worked in university, corporate and public libraries since 2009 and currently works as the University Copyright Coordinator at Murdoch University in Perth. Sharon is a graduate of North Metropolitan TAFE, also in Perth, with over 30 years experience in the library industry. Sharon is currently the Senior Library Officer in Special Collections at Murdoch University. The title of Helen's and Sharon's presentation is Pandemic Partnerships, How Challenging Times Became an Opportunity for a Teaching and Learning Partnership with TAFE. So please welcome Helen and Sharon.
Thanks a lot, Broderick. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our talk today. As Broderick said, our talk is about pandemic partnerships, and specifically for us, it's a partnership that we developed during our lockdowns here in Perth last year, and then sort of how they've developed since then as well. So I'll just start. So this is a little bit about me. I'm a slave to my corgi because she's so adorable. And I'm from Shetland. And as the introduction said, I work in copyright. So last year in copyright was quite a challenging year. So I created this meme for another paper I did, the distracted girlfriend meme, because working in copyright before COVID-19 was definitely a different world to working in it now. So a little bit more about that later, but I'm just going to go through it now. So to talk about the partnership, I need to talk about the way it started before the pandemic. So in 2019, I was approached by Louise Bond, who's a lecturer at TAFE in the Library Studies course, and she runs a unit on copyright for her students. She'd heard about me and she wanted to ask if she could bring her students to the university here to meet me, and then that I could give like a quick workshop and they could sort of see what it's like to work as a copyright officer at a university. So the students came along, they just came in here to my office, and I did a kind of quick workshop about, how's it to work in copyright? What kind of things do I do? And I also did a short version of like a copyright card game, so little Q&As with them, little questions to get them thinking about copyright in a teaching and learning context. And then I gave them a short library tour. So it was very, very simple and just a nice kind of networking workshop there. So then came 2020, and 2019 to 20 feels like a 10-year gap might have passed. It feels like a very long time in a very different world. So in March, I was at the ADA Forum in Canberra, and things started to feel kind of serious, and I was able to get home safely. But I came home to pretty much the announcement that the whole world was going to go into lockdown, and that, of course, included our university library and university, which meant that all of our print collections would be behind closed doors. So in the copyright world, with the Copyright Network, we had to think about how we could provide access to print collections, how could we provide the materials needed for unit coordinators to teach and have all the materials they needed without having in-person classes. So a very challenging time. So we got through that, and we just, had to start working from home, and everyone knows it was a big adjustment, or online teaching. So all those changes. And then I got another email from Louise, who said that, of course, all the TAFE students were now doing their teaching online and learning online through Blackboard Collaborate. And she asked me if we could continue the workshop, but of course, move it to an online space. And she'd also heard about my work with special collections. This was a few channels, but one of the TAFE students had done some volunteer work in special collections and has said how interesting it was. So Louise pretty much asked me and Sharon if we could collaborate and do a Blackboard Collaborate workshop, 2 workshops, 1 hour each. And mine would be sort of about copyright, kind of like the first workshop, a bit of background, what's it like to work in copyright, and then some questions. But I would also incorporate the way we apply copyright to working with heritage collections and special collections and digitization. So I spoke to Sharon and so did Louise, and we decided we would love to do those workshops. And that's how, during the pandemic, we developed this partnership and this workshop. So I'll talk a little bit about the Collaborate workshop that I developed for this online teaching. So as I said, I kind of called it a day in the life of a copyright officer. What kinds of things do I deal with? What kind of questions do I get? And I also explained to them, as they were learning about this in their copyright unit, the way I'm responsible for the compliance to the educational statutory license, the tertiary music license, and the screenwrite license. And I also talked about the way I advise on copyright and intellectual property as a non-lawyer at the university, and then talked about my networks with the copyright network. So every university in Australia has a copyright officer of some kind, and also our work with Universities Australia. And of course, I also talked about the work I do at Murdoch with Sharon in special collections. So of course, if you're going to digitize, materials, copyright is a huge part of that. So that was part of the workshop too. So how's it going now? So basically the workshop that we run now, I've got, this is my final point here, mixed mode delivery. So it's mixed now that once restrictions were lifted, and Sharon will talk more about this, we were able to have one of the workshops is still online, and then students come in and look at special collections, and Sharon does a wonderful presentation about that. So we feel that the workshops are very good together because they provide copyright in context. It allows students to come and look at collections. And even when we were online, Sharon did a kind of virtual tour of the collections, not the whole collections, but some, pointing out the things that we've done to put things up online with licenses and exceptions. We also talked to students about the duration of copyright, so things in the public domain. I feel that the mixed mode delivery also gives good student interaction, and having 2 workshops helps them feel comfortable with us, and then they can ask their questions. So overall, very positive, and it's been a great experience. So obviously this is a really mutual beneficial relationship. We provide these practitioner-led workshops that enrich the learning of the students in their copyright and repository units as we're doing the work that they're learning about. TAFE lecturers are really lovely people, and they've asked for our feedback about the units they were offering in their course, and they actually rearrange them. So when they come for their visit and do the workshops with us, they're actually studying those units at the right time. So they're doing them together, the repository and the copyright unit. And another great thing that Sharon will talk about more in detail is that the students loved our collections and work so much that they wanted to come on practicum here. And they come in pairs and they do a special project with Sharon, which gives them a very meaningful prac, and also, of course, helps us with the massive amount of work that we have to do. I'll just finish there. That's my part ended, and I'll hand to Sharon to talk about her wonderful work with the TAFE students.
Thank you, Helen. Can I have my next slide, please? So just a tiny little bit about me. My name is Sharon Beccaria, and I'm the Senior Library Officer, Special Collections at Murdoch University. I've worked at Murdoch University Library various roles for 18 years, including Special Collections for the past 5 years. And away from my library life, I am a complete sports junkie, with my main loves being AFL and supercars, and here I have joined them together on the grid at Bathurst in 2018. So yeah, I'm a bit of a strange hybrid. But can I have the next slide, please, Helen? So Special Collections commenced collaboration with Helen's outreach program due to the close working relationship that had evolved in the previous 6 months between Helen and myself while undertaking preparation for digitisation of the Irene Greenwood collection. Irene Greenwood was a feminist, peace activist, political activist, broadcaster and writer. And in 1981, she was the first woman to be awarded an honorary doctorate by Murdoch University. And Irene's collection includes her personal book library, radio program scripts, inwards and outwards correspondence, audio recordings, photographs, diaries, journal issues, published papers, unpublished manuscripts, and ephemera. So it is extreme. It's a very big collection, and it's a complex collection. And over the time, Helen and I discussed for many, many hours the possible copyright status of many components of Irene's collection regarding their suitability for our digitisation project. And these includes Irene's inwards and outward correspondence. And there is an example here of her unusual inward correspondence. This is actually a letter written by the Prime Minister Anthony Eden to her brother, who was administrator of the Northern Territory in the 1940s. So this is like what we call it third-party correspondence that has Helen and I have talked about many times, who owns the copyright and what we would do with this. Sorry, next slide. I've got myself lost already. So I created a workshop called Special Collections and Copyright after Helen and Louise got in touch with me saying that they'd like to supplement Helen's theoretical copyright session with a more practical one. I created a workshop called Special Collections and Copyright and initially presented it in June 2020 remotely via the TAFE LMS Blackboard Collaborate, as the students were unable to visit the university campus due to the COVID-19 restrictions limiting the number of external visitors. And the workshop was held the week after Helen's copyright session and designed to give the students practical examples of the Copyright Act being applied in our collection. And the presentation included more unusual examples of our collections, including fanzines. Murdoch University Library holds thousands of science fiction fanzines. These are self-made magazines that contain a myriad of copyright problems. And many of these fanzines contain little or no information about their creators, making them unable to be traced or identified. And obtaining permission to use these materials is impossible, creating orphan works, which sometimes the 200 AB copyright exception can be applied. And so you can see this example here. This fanzine, I think, has a title and it has time and date that it was created, but no name of the person. So this is definitely an orphan work. Next slide, please. So with COVID-19 lockdown restrictions lifted in Western Australia, the workshops were presented in person in November 2020 and March 2021, while still undertaking social distancing requirements. The TAFE students visited the university campus and toured the Special Collections workspace and storage area. And these visits inspired 2 students to undertake a 5-week practicum placement in Special Collections starting at the end of April 21. But unfortunately, there was a snap COVID lockdown during this time and the practicum students had to start their project during the first week of 2021. Next slide, please. These students indexed 122 audio cassettes that contained in the Irene Greenwood collection. These cassettes contain many interviews recorded with Irene and others, also off-air recordings of radio and television broadcasts pertaining to Irene's interest in the women's movement, peace movement and politics. This project gave the students the opportunity to apply their metadata skills in preparing the cassettes for digitisation, and these cassettes are currently being processed by the audio studios of the Digitisation Centre of Western Australia, which is located in the State Library of Western Australia. These cassettes contain different examples of copyright attribution. Irene assigned copyright of all items created by her to Murdoch University by the bequest in her will. However, copyright of all other materials are not created by Irene. For example, the off-air recordings of radio and television broadcasts will have to be assessed after they are processed. Next slide, please. So there are many outcomes, many positive outcomes of this collaboration between Helen, myself and TAFE. As Helen said before, in 2021, the Diploma of Library Information Services course at North Metropolitan TAFE, the structure was changed so that the cataloguing, copyright and repository units were taught in the same semester, as components of these units were encompassed in the workshops presented by Helen and myself. Because previously, I think cataloguing was taught after Helen and I gave our presentation. And so it was good that students got to know what we were talking about by sticking all these units together. Also, the partnership between the TAFE and the Murdoch University has been added to the library strategic plan. Helen and I were invited to attend the collaborators end of year function. And presenting the workshop enriches our professional development through teaching and networking. Perth and Western Australia have endured fewer lockdowns and COVID-19 interruptions than other parts of the country, but they've still forced us at times to change our delivery methods to maintain connections with the TAFE students and continue to supplement their classroom theory with practical applications in the workplace. Next slide, please. And I'd just like to finish off our presentation with a quote from Louise Bond, who is the senior lecturer at North Metropolitan TAFE. And so this is her feedback, and says, "This visit is a real highlight and it is especially good to have the Blackboard collaborate session with both as preparation the week before. It is great to have Helen's presentation and the Q&A ending with Sharon's introduction to special collections before the visit. As you saw, the students were fascinated and two have already put their hands up for a prac. We have found a winning formula there, and I hope that we can do this again next semester." So Helen and I have been running, well, collaboratively with Helen, we've been running these sessions for 2 years, and we're hoping to continue on for the near future, doing our sessions and also welcoming more prac students. We've already got 2 lined up for our next session in May next year already from the session that we just had recently. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Helen and Sharon. That was a really fascinating presentation. Sounds like a really valuable collaboration that you've got going there. You mentioned that you're still running a mixed mode of delivery. Western Australia is a big state, so does that mean you're catering to people that are not living in Perth, or are most of your students based in Perth?
I'll answer that one because I do the online part. No, it was simply like a kind of, that they preferred to do it that way because it was easier for them. It might be in the future that I actually go to the TAFE and present in their classroom. But this year, we've had a lot of, disruptions and snap lockdowns. And I think for them, it was easier not to get, because the students have to come to Murdoch and we're not that close to the city. So it was easy for them just to have the one visit 1 week rather than having to bring them out here twice. So it's kind of a convenience thing. And all their students are in person now in the CBD in Perth. So no, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure they're all in person in Perth and not remote students.
Okay. And have you gone on to employ any of those students that have done your training?
No, we haven't done that because we've been in a hiring freeze.
Okay.
So it's not, and also Sharon and I don't sort of get to employ people at our level. So, Sharon, did you want to add anything?
We haven't employed people, but I've actually been referee for a couple of TAFE students that have actually got jobs elsewhere. So I think even though we're not employing them ourselves, I've helped a couple of students actually get employment elsewhere, which I think is just as good, really.
Okay, great. And just a question about copyright. You've talked about how you provide training to students. In my experience, a lot of academic staff are not fully up to speed with copyright. Do you provide any training for academics?
At Murdoch?
Yes.
Yes, that's a big part of my job. So I run workshops and I've got a website, and of course I've got my consultation service. So yeah, that's a big part of it. But there is a copyright module that all academic staff you begin at the university you have to complete. So they get a basic introduction, and then all the curly questions, they come to me for help.
Yes, some of them can be quite curly, can't
Definitely.
they? Okay, well, there are no more questions that have come in, so thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. Yes, we'll take a short break now and come back with our next speakers.